Hello everybody, welcome back to another episode of Casing the Joint, brought to you by the Boyertown Museum of Historic Vehicles. I'm Kendra Cook, and here on Casing the Joint, what I like to do is try to focus on the small things here at the Boyertown Museum. You know, I'm surrounded by these enormous vehicles, and sometimes we overlook the little things that are here on display, but they also have their stories to tell. We don't want them to get lost in the shuffle. So let's change that. So today I am standing here next to one of our antique horse mannequins. So yes, this is a mannequin. It's a display advertising piece. You know, people that were selling things like tack or blinders, accoutrements for the horses, they could have had something like this as part of a showroom or a store and have these items displayed on it. Just like your people mannequins that you'd see in a department store today modeling the clothes. It's the same idea here. So I'm going to focus today on these lovely, lovely bells, which we typically call sleigh bells, horse bells, you know, something like that. And, you know, we kind of look at them today and we're like, oh, isn't that cute? Or, you know, it's so nice and old fashioned and it's adorable and it's pretty. But they actually do have a purpose for the late 1800s, early 1900s. But before I get to that, let's go way back in time. Let's go to ancient times. And, you know, bells were used in the ancient world to decorate horses as well. Now, a lot of that, yes, is kind of a wealth or a status symbol. You know, obviously in the ancient world, if you have the money to outfit your horse in bells, you've got some wealth accumulated, that's for sure. So it definitely back then was very much a status symbol. There also is some suspicions behind why the ancient world would put bells on their horses. They did believe that that would ward off evil spirits if the horse, you know, made a noise as it was trotting or galloping. Now, that's the ancient world, okay? So let's come a little closer to our time period here, and let's think about late 1800s, early 1900s, when the carriage factory, especially here at Boyertown, was in full force, the Boyertown Carriage Works. And the Carriage Works did build a lot of sleighs, and that's where you're going to find that these bells were used the most, when horses were pulling sleighs. So why is that? Now, sleighs, again, I think we kind of have this idea that sleighs are kind of a quaint or like a fun, cute thing that people used to go for sleigh rides. But sleighs were actually very practical. You know, in the winter time at this time period, they didn't remove the snow. They didn't plow the snow from the roads like we do now. They didn't, you know, put down all that salt and brine on the roads like they do now. Instead, what they did was they would pad the snow down, tamp it down really tight. They used to have these enormous snow rollers that horses would pull. I mean, they're huge. They look like enormous logs. And the horses would pull those through the streets and it would pack that snow down really tight. Why did they do that? Well, it's not really great for a carriage wheel to go through packed down snow like that. But it is good for the runners of a sleigh. You know, those sleigh runners are metal, flat metal, nice and thick, or nice and straight. They will glide right over that packed down snow. And they'll go pretty fast. And it doesn't matter how well trained your horse is. That horse is moving fast. It's pulling a sleigh, it's got people in it, and it's going to be tough for that horse to stop quickly if a pedestrian were in the way. And the pedestrian might very easily not hear a slick, fast move over the snow. So what's the solution here? Outfit your horse with some bells. And this is now a warning system for those pedestrians. They know that there is a fast horse approaching. They got to get out of the way. So that's really why they put these bells on their horses attached to their sleighs. It's very much like even early cars had really obnoxious horns on them. You know, they had those, either those bulb horns that are really loud, or the klaxon horns, the ooga horns that go, you know, the Model T horn that it sometimes is known as. You know, that really was to kind of warn pedestrians. Now, obviously, those gasoline cars aren't very quiet, but they're still new and people are still kind of getting used to the fact that they're coexisting on the street with these cars. As we were discussing beforehand, the electric cars, they had that problem too. I mean, that was a heavy car and it was quiet. So, you know, this is the same reason why they put the horns on the cars. It's a warning system. It's letting people know that this is approaching behind them. They should be wary of their surroundings. So just because they're practical, though, does not mean that people couldn't make them beautiful and make them decorative. Why not make it look good, right? So you'll be able to see here on a close-up. Now, I know it's hard from all the way back there, but we'll get a close-up here and you can see these bells have an etching on them, you know, to kind of make them look a little nicer. A nice little design in there. It's worn off in some spots, but you can definitely see it if you get up close. Now these bells too, these are all the same size all the way around, but they did make them that they would have a gradation in size. You know, they might start small, they'd get gradually larger. The largest bell would be in the center and then they'd go back down the size scale again. So that was another way to kind of make them look a little nicer or give different tones as well to the ringing. And they also attached in different ways, and some of that even could indicate to you the expense that was put on these. Now the really nice bells would be tied on with like a leather string almost, you know, a little leather strap. They would tie on each individual bell. This particular set, the bells are riveted onto the leather. There is, however, another like double belt, another strap that goes on the other side that's tied. It goes all the way around. Why would they do that? Well, you don't want these metal rivets to irritate your horse. It's going to cause a lot of friction. It causes a lot of pain for the animal. So they put this backer belt on here to protect the horse. So that was another way to attach the bells to the leather strap. I've also sometimes seen the bells attached directly to the shaft. This is the shaft. Now, this particular horse is hooked up to a buggy, but a sleigh would have this too. This is how the vehicle attaches to the horse so the horse can pull it. So the shaft might too also have the bells directly attached to there. That would cut down on your time dressing your horse essentially to go out for a ride if at least the bells are already on. Now, we also, of course, too, get a lot of comments that these are jingle bells, kids especially. That's what they associate, you know, jingle bells, the song. Now, that song was written by a gentleman named James Pierpont. He was living in Georgia when he wrote that song. He was a church organist, and he wrote it for a Thanksgiving service. So he didn't necessarily have Christmas in mind here, although we now use it as a Christmas song. But he was raised in New England, so he was very familiar with using sleighs as a way to move around and travel in the winter with those New England winters, of course. So he mentions in the one line in the song is bells on bobtail ring. So I have been asked that, what is a bobtail? A bobtail was a fashion choice, really, for the horse. So the owner would sometimes clip the tail very short. Our horse Mannequin has a full, luxurious tail back there. But it was very common to cut the tail very short, like a bob, and attach the bells to the bobtail. Of course, it looks great, very fashionable, you know, the horse is looking stylish. But like the bells, it might look stylish. It is a practical thing to do as well. That tail, if it's a bobtail, would not get tangled up in all this the leather straps, the shafts, the wheels of your carriage if your horse is pulling a carriage. So again, bobtail, a pretty thing, but it has a practical purpose, just like these bells. So the next time you visit the museum, take a note of our sleigh bells. We have 2 horse mannequins. They each have a set of bells on them. The other mannequin is actually on the other side of the camera. I've been looking at him this whole time. They each have a set of bells. That other horse has a different set. It looks a lot different. I think we have another few other bells sitting around here and there. So like I said, next time you visit, come pay attention to those. Imagine yourself on a crisp winter morning and the quiet sleigh ride you would have if it weren't for these bells. Thanks for joining us here on this episode of Casing the Joint. I'll see you next time where we'll find another little tiny treasure here in the museum.